Well, it's here. Yaira #1 from the Rippaverse. This is actually the first Rippaverse book I bought. I did catch a couple of the ISOM reviews and watched a couple of the videos, and from what I saw, I didn't particularly enjoy the ISOM book, so it wasn't my cup of tea. Alpha Core, I was given a copy for review. I did enjoy Alpha Core. It was a decent book. I gave it like a B plus, I think, on Well Read Show. But the one that really fascinated me was Yaira for a few reasons. Obviously, number one, aesthetically, she's attractive, a female attractive character. So, and of course, it's a number one, and the buzz around it was kind of intriguing. So, uh, positive or negative, they did the job of getting enough eyes to make it successful. I'm not going to debate numbers, but it made over $1 million. So, if you're an indie comic creator and you're trying to sell a book and it makes $1 million, you'll take it. So now I'm gonna do a review of the book. I did read it, and I'm probably gonna remember a few things. I'm not gonna do a review of every single detail of the book. I'll touch on a few things, some spoilers. So if you haven't read the book, then don't watch the whole video. I'll do a quick non-spoiler review. I'll say this. So Yaira's not a hero. She's more of an anti-hero. In the first 2/3, while she is fighting the bad guys, she is still doing questionable things, and her character is, for the most part, pretty unlikable. As I was reading it, I kept asking myself, does something happen with this character? Does she go through a change of some kind that's going to make me relate? And there's a revelation in the third act that recontextualizes everything that's done in the first two acts. And then you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense now. Now you begin to see why she acts the way she does. That's one of my gripes with the book is I think they could have taken that revelation of her origin and placed it a little earlier in the story so that we'd have enough time to really relate to Yaira and kind of understand and even sympathize with her actions and why she does what she does. Definitely not a girl boss at all. Like this idea that she's a girl boss because she's OP and not likable. There's a reason why, and I'll talk about a little bit about that in the spoiler review. But one of the things I liked about the book was her interactions with Solari from Alpha Core. Alpha Core plays a big part in the story, so if you like Alpha Core, this book kind of acts as somewhat of a soft sequel to Alpha Core, with Yaira being the main character. We see more of Solari's characterization and what he's trying to do with his mission purpose, especially involving a character named Stefania Martinez, who she has the same powers that Yaira has, but she doesn't understand them or why she has them. And she was part of a gang, which is why she looks the way she looks. So she has like a certain hairstyle that we call it the lesbian hairstyle, where the hair is parted one way. And so this is her, and she's part of a gang, as you can see. So when you're in a gang, gang culture kind of forms you, and not in a good way. So I know that some people, when they saw some of the preview art, are like, "Oh, she looks like an SJW. She looks like a typical female in these modern comics." Well, she is in a culture that doesn't embrace feminism or femininity. So she's going to look the part. She's going to look like someone detestable, and she acts that way too. So it made sense. She's in a gang. Women who tend to be in gangs don't tend to look attractive. So, but and now talk about her in a little more in the spoiler part of the video. But Yaira does take her in, or tries to take her in, but there's resistance because of the interaction with some of the villains in the book. One panel in particular that's getting a little controversy, or as I call the Kyle Rittenhouse argument, is where Yaira smashes to death an inmate during a scene where there's a prison riot and the inmates are fighting each other, nay, killing each other. This particular inmate actually approaches Yaira and basically is promising to sexually assault her. So, and he just got into a fight with one of the other inmates in the previous panel. So her reaction is a natural reaction. And again, when you look back or when you find out the reveal at the end of the story, this is a natural reaction to someone who is low-key threatening to sexually assault you. Quite a few criticisms that are not valid. So again, yeah, there are certain things in the story that make sense once you tie the pieces together. And the villains of the story are people from her old world who are trying to bring her back in for justice, a world that she had escaped previously. And that ties a little bit in the spoiler part. And I'll mention quickly the spoilers towards the end of the review so you can see exactly how it all connects. But she's fighting them while trying to help Stefania, who's trying to get to grips with her power. And something happens to Stefania that causes her to turn against Yaira. And then Yaira is having to deal with the guilt of Stefania's tragedy while fighting off these invaders who are trying to bring Yaira back to quote-unquote justice. Meanwhile, Solari from Alpha Corps is trying to get Stefania to change her ways so that they can bring Yaira to justice, or at least try to get Yaira grounded so that she can stop what she's doing. Now, I'm going to go into a little spoiler territory here. So if you haven't read the book, then just you can stop here. But I will say this, that it is a fun read. It's a pretty good first story. It's a complete story. And that is as much as I can ask for in a first book. I'm not a fan of glorified epilogues, especially when we got to wait a while for the second book to come out. Give me a complete story. I don't mind complete stories with a semi-cliffhanger that sets itself up for the second book and a connecting overall longer story. So this book gets points for giving me a complete story while setting up details for the second story. The art is pretty good by Debora Carita. Yes, there's some quote-unquote inconsistencies here or there, but you can find inconsistencies in Cyberfrog. You can find inconsistencies in Graveyard Shift. You can find inconsistencies in a lot of comic books. You can go back to like the older DC and Marvel stuff. You can find inconsistencies in a lot of the artwork. I consider that a natural aspect of the flaw of the human hand when it comes to artwork. So I'm not nitpicky when it comes to the art. It did its job overall. I like the coloring. The line art was pretty good. It was better than I saw him. The coloring was far better than I saw him. And it followed up in the footsteps of Alpha Corps' coloring and dynamic angles. So there's improvement going on in the Rippaverse from ISOM to this book. So to me, that it's a step in the right direction. And again, this is a good first book for Yaira. As far as the spoilers, 3, 2, 1. So Yaira is a widow. If you remember The Lord of the Rings, if you remember Arwen, how Elrond was trying to convince Arwen not to marry Aragorn because elves live a lot longer than humans do, and Arwen took the risk of marrying Aragorn knowing that she would live a long life as a widow and outgrow Aragorn. That's what happens with Yaira. She marries a man, they get married, have kids, those kids have kids, so she becomes a grandmother, but she notices that as the years go by, he starts aging and she doesn't. And she realizes that she's been cursed with living a long, long life and seeing all her loved ones, including her husband, her kids, and her grandkids all dying. So she's in a world that she's alien to. She's lost her purpose and her identity. Now, as a widower, I can tell you, when you lose your spouse, you lose your identity, you lose your purpose. Your outlook on the world is totally foreign because it's a new world that you didn't ask to be a part of. So I've been in a group where widows, we'll stick with widows because this is a female character. Widows tend to offer a variety of emotions. Some of them ranging from sadness and hope to outright anger and hatred. Yaira just happens to fall in the camp of anger and hatred. She has a lot of anger in her, and she uses that in a way that's very destructive, not necessarily to hurt people, but if she doesn't like you, she'll let you know. And especially when it comes to criminals, she's not particularly fond or sympathetic to criminals, but that's because of the world that she inherited living a life as a widowed character. Towards the end of the book, when that memory is triggered, you start to see a change in her, and that's noticeable in her interactions with during her interactions with Solari from Alpha Core. You start to see certain things and how some things that she says to Solari, including making references to being a married couple, which was I figured that she would say something like that. But then you look at it from the context of, oh, she was married at one time, she had a love, she was in a family, she had a family, and she lost that family, and she's obviously yearning for that family. She's yearning to be a part of that family, and you see hints of that with her interaction with Solari from Alpha Core. But it becomes more obvious towards the end of the book when Solari more or less adopts Stefania as his protege, and we see Stefania having a change in haircut, and she starts to look a little bit more feminine. And it's almost like when a man is guiding a young person, that young person is being guided with a sense of discipline, purpose, instruction. It's almost like it's almost like a celebration of fatherhood. And we're in June right now, so this is Father's Day month. So this is a wonderful nod to all the fathers and how important it is for a child to be raised by a man, especially a young female, so she can embrace her femininity and have a sense of structure and discipline. And we don't get to see Yaira's full suit till the end of the book, which it's to me somewhat disappointing because the suit was pretty toyetic, and I would have liked to have seen it at least for the most of the third act. So I guess you could say in a way it's kind of like the MCU's Daredevil series, where you don't get to see Daredevil's iconic red suit until the final episode of that show, which didn't hurt the show overall because it was still a great show. At least that first season was still great. And it doesn't affect the story being told in Yaira, but it would have been visually nice to have that suit in action. So girl boss, no, just a widow who's hurt and lashing out at a world that she's not recognizing, a world that she didn't ask for, with powers that she has to live with. And towards the end of the book, she has accepted the consequences of her actions. She's accepted the consequences of what she's done and has to live with it and learn to be more disciplined and more polished as a person, as a female with powers. And will that make her into someone more of a likable hero in the second book? We're going to see, but the foundations have been laid, and now we see a dynamic that's happening. We have Solari raising Stefania. We have Yaira watching from a distance, but going through a change in her outlook where she's more responsible and actually uses her powers in a better way. And again, if you're an Alpha Core fan, you're definitely going to love this book. And it does help to read the Alpha Core book before this. But yeah, it does expand more on the Alpha Core story. And it's funny because I think Alpha Core is the center of the Rippaverse, not ISOM. I think it's Alpha Core, which is fine because I think you have a dynamic that's pretty, especially when you mix them up with characters like Yaira. You could do so much with Alpha Core and expand on each individual character's personality and arcs that you have a solid core with upcoming characters like Gooding and Salvage PI. So I think that really making Alpha Core the center of the Rippaverse is probably going to be its biggest strength for the Rippaverse universe. But these are my thoughts overall. Not a perfect book, but it is a good read, a good solid read. And I think it's a book you got to read. Once you get to the end of the book and you get that reveal, you probably have to dedicate one more day to read it again, knowing that reveal, and so you can see things you missed. And then you're like, oh wow, yeah, okay, yeah, that's pretty. Again, with widows, their emotions are off the charts. They become part of a world they didn't inherit. They lose their purpose. They lose a sense of love, a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose, identity. And from a man's perspective, as a widower, you lose purpose and identity. You're gonna be angry. You're gonna probably hate the world, and that's something that if you haven't experienced widowhood, you probably won't be able to understand that. And I'm not saying that every person that's widowed experiences that type of emotion or reacts the same way. There's no one way that a widow or widower reacts, but anger is not an uncommon emotion among widows and widowers, especially anger against the world and anger for a environment that is foreign to you and alien and strange to you. But yeah, that's all I got to say on this. But yeah, it's a solid read. I am looking forward to issue 2. I will be buying issue number 2, and hopefully the foundation that's been laid by the end of the book will be expounded upon in the second issue, and I look forward to it. So yeah, definitely pick this book up. It's it's a full story, very very nice thick book. It is a good addition to your collection, and I'm hoping for bigger things for the second book. If you'd like this review, please leave a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and also consider backing my book, Beast Citizen Road Warrior Drake. If you go to roadwarriordrake.com, it'll take you to the crowdfunder, and consider backing that book as well as the first book, Street Champion Road Warrior Drake. And I think you will have an excellent time reading those books and adding some craziness and a dynamic character in Road Warrior Drake to your library. You will not regret it. So thanks again for watching, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. And Ed Piskor and Jim Rugg would say, read more comics.